truth, no facades. On my grind every day, stay. I'm the truth, no facades. On my grind every day, stay. I'm the truth, no facades. On my grind every day, stay. I'm the truth, I'm the truth, I'm the truth. I flex when I step, self-made, that's a bet. In my zone, feeling blessed, not a clone, I'm unique. Counting wins, not the stress, with success on my crest. Heavy crown, but I'm strong, never bound to defeat. Riding clean, watch me gleam, elevate to extreme. 808s, hit the beat, my reflection's what I meet. Rocking jewels, breaking rules, my own path, power leads. I'm the one taking flight, hottest peak in my sight. I'm the truth, no facades, on my grind.
Apos Audio sent me the SMSL RAW-HA1, a $250 balanced headphone amplifier and preamp that's being marketed, once again, as the next technical marvel in desktop audio, especially if you watch those online reviews. And in typical SMSL fashion, the spec sheet reads like an engineering resume. Dual outputs, ultra-low THD, and the latest Cirrus Logic CS43131 DAC chip as the headline feature. But let's be clear from the start. None of this makes it sound more musical than any other transparent DAC or amp on the market. The measurements are impressive, I will admit, but the musicality SMSL hints at and its fanboys constantly harp about isn't coming from the chip. It's coming from your brain interpreting volume, bias, and presentation. SMSL loves leaning on new DAC chip models as selling points, and the CS43131 is no exception. It's a capable part. It's got 32-bit audio, DSD capable, low noise, and built around Cirrus's patented multi-bit Delta Sigma modulator. Ooh, ah. But here's the thing. This same fundamental architecture has existed for years in earlier Cirrus chips, AKM's Velvet Sound line, and ESS Sabre variants. These guys all do the same thing. The differences between them are almost entirely in implementation, how the manufacturer handles the analog output stage, power supply filtering, and clocking. No chip by itself is more musical than any other. The CS43131's measured THD and noise are already well below audibility, and its low-power headphone output section isn't even being used here. SMSL runs it into an external amplifier stage anyway, so I kind of wonder what the point is of the 43131 being shoehorned into this device, other than it's new. So, when you see marketing phrases like enhanced musical performance, what they really mean is, hey, it's a new chip, same transparency. If I had to give Cirrus credit for something, their parts often have slightly lower idle noise than Sabre chips in poor implementations, and the word here is poor. But that's not a sound signature, it's an engineering competence issue, and quite frankly, it will vary from unit to unit, and in fact, it will vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. And these days, the vast majority of manufacturing with these DACs and amps is pretty competent. And SMSL, to their credit, implements these chips cleanly themselves. But let's not pretend that the CS43131 is somehow a leap in realism or emotion. It is not. The RAW-HA1's physical construction is typical SMSL. Solid anodized aluminum, clean machining, tight tolerances. But once you turn it on, it's the same tired interface we've seen in a dozen other devices. In fact, this chassis itself is pretty dated by this point. The LCD screen is small, non-touch, low contrast, and is recessed. It looks fine from a distance, but it's almost useless for navigation. I wonder if SMSL could have implemented a larger screen or a touch screen if they had not opted for the latest DAC chip instead. SMSL claims that the UI is new, yet every menu behaves exactly like the old one. The same nested options, same lag when scrolling, same random non-responsiveness of the knob button, and the same poor input logic through the remote. Quite frankly, the only newness from this display is that you can select it to be a little bit more graphical, but that doesn't help you at all because it's just graphical on the splash screen. It doesn't do anything to change the actual menu structure. By the way, let's talk a little bit about that remote. It's that bottom shelf plastic remote, SMSL and topping throw in with every DAC they've ever sold, identical to the ones bundled with their $100 or $200 units. The buttons feel mushy, the layout wastes space, and it's easy to press the wrong one in a dim light. And quite frankly, these are not specially designed for each individual type of DAC that SMSL and topping sell, which means that they're missing out on specialized features that are specific to their specific DACs. And so you're getting a generic remote with no real input that's consistent for that specific item that you just purchased. So while SMSL hypes a redesigned user experience, it's really just a reheated version of what we've seen since 2019 and before. For $250, it's acceptable, but don't expect the ergonomics or usability of an RME, which quite frankly is the gold standard for menus and options of any DAC ever made, period. The RAW-HA1's main selling point isn't its measurements or its DAC chip. It's actually the combination of headphone amplification and stereo pre-out. You can drive balanced headphones through the 4.4mm port or unbalanced ones through the 1/4 inch, or feed a pair of unpowered speakers through the back end. It's this dual nature of the device that really makes it worthwhile, in my opinion. The ability to use unpowered speakers, something that we traditionally do not get from SMSL or topping or the vast majority of other audiophile companies, combined with the headphone output at this price range. God, this is a good change from a company that sells reiterative stuff all the time. That flexibility at this price is legitimately useful. It means you can run a desktop setup with both headphones and speakers without swapping cables or using a separate preamp. And for $250, that dual-purpose design is the real value here, not the idea that somehow it sounds better than other transparent devices. I ran the RAW-HA1 through a proper test chain, same as all my other amplifier and DAC reviews. The comparative sources that I used were the RME 80i2 DAC, Matrix Mini-I Pro 3, and the Mytek Brooklyn DAC Plus. I compared the RAW-HA1 against the Gustard H16 as well, another fully balanced, clean measuring amplifier. Instant switching was handled through passive switch boxes, allowing true A/B comparisons with no cable movement or delay. And I made sure to braid the cable, so at that point I had no clue which cable led to where. All outputs were level matched within 1 decibel, if not better, using pink noise, a multimeter on dummy loads, and then verified with an SPL meter at the ear cup of my Sennheiser HD800S before beginning. Headphones that I used here were, again, the HD800S, the audeze LCD X 2021 version, the audeze LCD 4Z, and the Head Audio headphone version 1 or 2. I really don't remember. So this covers both high impedance and planar loads. So what was the difference, if any, that I heard from the HA1 compared to the other devices? Well, here's what happened. During the first round of testing, and by the way, I did a total of 16 rounds over a 2-week period, I thought I heard a difference between the RME's output and the HA1. The HA1 seemed marginally clearer, and I perceived a bit more sparkle in the lower treble in some tracks. I was ready to call it subtle but noticeable, since I kept hearing this track after track after track, and I had thought I'd made sure that the volumes were matched before starting. And then I checked the levels again, and the RAW-HA1 was playing about 2 decibels louder. That's it, just 2 decibels. At that difference, the brain perceives the louder sample as clearer, more detailed, and more, dynamic. A psychoacoustic illusion caused by the equal loudness contours of human hearing. In other words, this is just your brain thinking it's better merely because it just happens to be slightly louder. However, once I dialed the RAW-HA1 down about 2 decibels, that sparkle vanished. The two products became indistinguishable, both in blind switching and long listening sessions. I repeated the process with the Gustard H16, and again the same pattern appeared, slight perceived differences that disappeared the moment levels were more precisely matched. Every claimed signature, warmth, depth, imaging, bass, texture, collapsed into transparency. This is why audiophiles get misled so easily. And so I repeated the same type of test using random tracks against the other devices that I compared the RAW-HA1 against. And yes, there were occasions where the RAW-HA1 or the other device sounded a little bit clearer or a little bit more nuanced. But when it came down to actually dialing in the perceived volume just a little bit more, those differences vanished every single time. And this is why you have to do proper testing. Just because you hear a difference initially doesn't mean that that difference is because of the device's inherent musicality. It's very likely the placement of your headphones or your speakers or your head, and also the difference in volume matching. If you're doing actual A/B tests, which the vast majority of audiophiles don't. Our hearing is not objective, it's contextual. A fraction of a decibel, a different lighting condition, or simply knowing which amp is playing can create a phantom change that feels completely real. ASR also measured the RAW-HA1, and ASR's review confirmed what the ear already tells you under control and good A/B testing parameters. The RAW-HA1 measures flat across the audible spectrum with total harmonic distortion and noise roughly a negative 124 decibels below the signal, 1,000 times quieter than you can perceive. And I do mean you, including the subjectivist. Output impedance is about 0.1 ohms, meaning it won't alter the frequency response of any headphone you plug in. Noise is inaudible even on ultra-sensitive IEMs. Crosstalk is great, and dynamic range is effectively infinite for human hearing, but keep in mind that your music is the critical factor where dynamic range is concerned. The vast majority of content, and I am confident this includes everything you normally listen to, is confined to a narrow slice of dynamic range, which any competent DAC and amp can easily handle and reproduce, including gear that costs as little as $100 or less. In normal terms, the RAW-HA1 is transparent. There's no coloration, no compression, no tonal bias. It's a wire with gain. Let's take a moment to talk briefly about the sound tuning options here as well. First, there are the typical DAC filters. They are completely useless, as in every single DAC. These filters kick in well beyond your hearing ability and fall well outside the recorded frequencies of every single music and audiobook track you have ever listened to, and these filters have zero effect whatsoever on any sound you are consuming. Period. The subset of audiophiles who claim otherwise can participate in proper blind tests to figure this out themselves. Second, the RAW-HA1 has several equalizer modes. The direct setting makes no adjustments. The tone setting evidently also makes no adjustments when toggled. And I looked in the manual, which doesn't say anything about what the tone is supposed to do. In my repeated tests using numerous headphones, the tone mode did nothing. So it does nothing. The SDB mode seems to increase volume by an obvious amount. I would guess between 3 to 5 decibels. There might be a slight increase in sub-bass, but that could just be a false impression due to the volume jump. And yes, the manual also omits to explain what SDB is actually supposed to do. The other settings, bass, super bass, rock, and, etc., all have very minimal differences from each other. They do make some alterations, but quite frankly, these are fairly light touches. That may be good for those who don't want the DAC to do too much coloration, and it will be bad for those who actually want the equalization functions to make a noticeable difference every time. There are two other separate settings, bass and treble. Each of these has an 18-point swing from -9 to +9. These do in fact make a difference. You can modify both at the same time, so arguably you could set bass to +4 and treble to +3 or any other combination. Now, the problem with all of these settings I've talked about, besides the irritating issues I've already mentioned, is that you have no graphical overlay to show what is actually supposed to be happening. You don't know where the treble or bass are being affected. You have no visual cue what any of the EQ modes are doing to the frequency range. On the other hand, the manual does say that the bass and treble adjustments are in increments of 1 full decibel, so there is that. You just don't know what those frequencies are, which are being affected by bass or treble or any of the other so-called EQ functions. So, as usual for the majority of these hi-fi brands, they finally offer a feature people have been demanding for many, many years, only to do a half-assed job of it. In all honesty, if you want EQ, use your computer or phone or digital audio player. Trying to use the EQ on the RAW-HA1 is a practice in frustration. Let's circle back to the CS43131 for a moment, because I know there are reviewers out there who are gushing about this DAC chip because it's new. Cirrus Logic touts things like, quote, smart digital interpolation filters and low-power Class H driver stages, etc., etc. But the RAW-HA1 doesn't exploit those differentiators. It uses the chip purely as a digital-to-analog converter feeding a discrete analog amplifier. All the meaningful sonic determinants, distortion, linearity, noise, channel crosstalk, are already at inaudible levels. You will never be able to perceive them between this particular chipset and any other modern chipset, even if it's 5 or 6 or 10 years old. Once a DAC or amp's noise and distortion are below roughly, say, negative 100 decibels, the only differences left are outside the audible domain: power handling, heat features, and ergonomics. The CS43131 is not more musical. It's just more efficient and slightly cleaner on paper. There's nothing wrong with this DAC chip, but there's also nothing magical about it, like any other DAC chip out there. Oh, by the way, I also conducted the A/B comparison against the H16, which is a neutral headphone amplifier. And against the H16, the performance is effectively identical. Both are powerful, clean, and neutral. The RAW-HA1 runs a little bit cooler by touch and costs less, but if you blind switch them, you can't tell them apart. Where the RAW-HA1 pulls ahead is in its compactness and inclusion of both headphone and preamp outs at this price point, and we've already talked about that. And that's really the selling feature. It's not new sound, it's just more convenience. The RAW-HA1 is exactly what a $250 transparent amp should be: quiet, powerful, flexible, and free of audible flaws. In fact, I think this is the laundry list for every single amplifier and DAC out there in the world, so kudos. It's not an innovative design. Its screen and UI are relics, and its remote feels like a $5 throw-in. But yeah, it does the job. The real value lies in the RAW-HA1's dual-purpose design, and of course, pretty good measured performance. And I think overall that's genuinely useful. But here's a cautionary note. Don't buy into the marketing hype about musicality, new chip technology, or redesigned interface. None of that changes the sound. Once you level match and test blind, the RAW-HA1 sounds indistinguishable from any other competent amplifier and DAC, because transparency is, hey, transparency. If you want better sound, upgrade your headphones, your music, or your listening space, not your amp or your DAC, or your cables for that matter. Oh, and also don't upgrade your power supply, please. Oh, and by the way, this includes any audio fool advice out there that says you can improve the sound of this product or any other audiophile product by adding tape to it, putting a paperweight on it, or covering it with mythical audiophile magic dust. Those are absurd reflections by personalities whose common sense is diminished with every affiliate sale they make. In summary, the RAW-HA1's brilliance is not in reinventing audio. It hasn't done that. It's in fact in reminding us that audio was perfected a very long time ago, and finally, we have a compact unit that offers speaker out, headphone out, and for $250. Thank you. This product for this price really does the job.